Hello everyone, my name is Ian Nee Lewis.
And I'm Reto Meier, and on today's App Clinic we'll be looking at apps people use while they're traveling.
That's an excellent idea. And I just swallowed coffee down my lungs.
Ouch,
Why don't you take the next line?
That is the wrong place to be drinking your coffee. Gone are the days of badly folded maps, guidebooks, and laminated holiday itineraries. Today you can keep everything you need in the palm of your hand.
That's right. No longer will you look like a bumbling tourist standing on the corner of Oxford Street and Charing Cross Road with your London street map unfolded before you, fruitlessly trying to figure out which direction is Tottenham Court. You know, I never even do that.
No? What's your plan?
My plan is I'm always looking at the curb in London because it tells me which way the traffic is flowing.
That is very true. Keeping your eye on the road is probably wise for an American in London if you don't want to be murdered by a black cab.
In any case, let's face it, when you're in a foreign city, foreign country, there's a lot to keep in your mind. And I don't think my mind is big enough to encompass it all.
Well, you want to be able to use your mind for things like appreciating the sights and sounds of the new city that you're visiting, not trying to remember exactly where you need to be and how you're going to get there.
And you certainly do not want to be unfolding a paper map because that's just like a sign that says mug me.
Yeah, please, steal my stuff. I have stuff. I probably have 3 weeks worth of money in my pocket. Please rob me. And that is not the message you want to be
It's funny
sending
because
out.
you do get different reactions in every city. For instance, in London, I think they just try and sell you like a 3-card Monty. In New York, they kill you. In Beijing, they want to take you to tea and then you pay for it.
Oh, nice.
And in Shanghai, they want to introduce you to your sister. Their sister.
Indeed. Well, introducing them to my sister would be interesting.
Yeah, that too.
Particularly as I don't have a sister. Anyway, so today we're going to be looking at 4 apps that viewers have nominated as must-have travel assistance apps. So we're going to be looking at social venue discovery classic Foursquare.
The ultimate in travel management, Tripit.
And one-click location sharing widget, Shareware location widget.
Excellent. So we'll be taking a closer look at each of these apps and using them as a kicking off point to explore the technologies and the best practices that you need in order to create a must-have travel app.
All that and more on
The App Clinic.
So travel assistance is a pretty broad category, and that's been reflected in the 3 apps that we'll be looking at today.
As part of the developer relations team at Google, travel is a big part of our job, or it used to be before we got this Boss Video Studio, the video studio that puts that thing in back of us.
Boom.
Hey! So this is a category that we are intimately familiar with. I've been traveling for work for, 10 years now, and it can be a nightmare.
It's also one of the more popular groups of apps in Google Play, and the popular apps in this category tend to have very loyal and passionate users. Take, for example, Foursquare.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a look. Ooh, boom! Look at that.
Beautiful. Now, this isn't a travel app per se, but it's definitely useful as a travel app. I think you had some insights into that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. We want to put that in front. In fact, yeah.
Yeah,
I remember how this was supposed to work now.
Yes, indeed.
Excellent.
Okay. Wonderful.
So when I was growing up in Australia, Foursquare was the name of an independent group of supermarkets whose TV ads implored me to come in for a square deal. So every time I look at this app, I hear the jingle playing in my head. Leaving that aside, I'm a big fan of Foursquare, both for the service and the features that they offer, as well as their passion for creating a really great user experience, which is a really important thing. And we can see that over the course of the years, the Foursquare app has really progressed. As each version of Android has come out, they've refreshed the UI, they've taken advantage of some of our best practices. So this is an app that I'm a really big fan of. Now, strictly speaking, you don't need to be traveling for Foursquare to be useful. In a lot of ways, it's most useful when you're close to home doing your daily routine. I know a lot of people whose coffee shop loyalty is based around fierce competition to maintain their status as mayor of Pete's Coffee Shop on the corner of El Camino and San Antonio roads. Now, a big part of Foursquare's success is also around the social elements of its use, as indicated by this screenshot. It's a way to share where you are, let you know where your friends are hanging out, and all those sorts of things. But for today, we're going to be focusing on its use while you're on the road. And that's where I found it to be the most compelling. When I'm away from home on a trip, there's really no chance I'm going to become the mayor of anything except for maybe the hotel that I'm staying at. So the app's primary use case switches from sort of consistent use of the same venues to discovery and exploration.
Now this is the part that I really wanted to hear about, because I have avoided Foursquare forever. First, because it was a hipster app, and second, because I just couldn't see the use in being a mayor. I'm the kind of person who's so ultra competitive that I avoid competition just so I don't have to lose.
That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
I like it. So when I lived in London, I'd visit the mothership here at Google every 3 months or so. And as soon as I landed in SFO and checked into the terminal, it was game on. Coffee shops, hotels, restaurants, hot dog stands, pretty much anything. I used to travel with, I think only once or twice with Nick and Richard. And those guys would be on the Caltrain, checking into each Caltrain stop as they went past it. So as far as competition goes, those guys are pretty hardcore. So the thrill of rocketing up the leaderboard is a short-term gain, although what really makes this app a travel assistance powerhouse is its discoverability features. So back in, I can't even remember when it was, 2009, 2010, whenever the Nexus 1 came out, I went on a 10-day European roadshow where we hit something like 9 cities in 10 days, staying in each one just long enough to get a good night's sleep, hand out a couple hundred Nexus 1s, and grab a meal. So suddenly...
We don't do that anymore, by the way. We do not hand out phones anymore.
Which is sad.
It
was a lot of fun. It was an easy way to make friends in foreign cities.
Right? It's like being those GIs in World War II with their chocolate and cigarettes.
Exactly. They loved me. Everywhere I went, they loved me.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm sure it had nothing to do with the giveaways. So suddenly having an app that tells you where you can get a good meal and rewards you with points for doing so really becomes very appealing. So I'm going to go into more detail as to how the social discovery service on Foursquare works a little later on. But first, let's take a look at Tripit.
Indeed. Oh, wow. It's totally covered up. Okay. Oh, right. We're supposed to do it this way.
Yeah,
okay.
Clever, huh?
I love Tripit. By the way, I should mention that Reto fracking loves Tripit.
I do. I love it a lot.
But I don't fracking love it because it's not 2008 anymore. When I started going on business trips, I didn't even have a cell phone, much less a smartphone. I had to manually create my own version of Tripit with printouts of bookings and receipts and flight itineraries and maps to my apartment and maps of the train. And I kept doing this for years. When I worked for Microsoft, I tried to do it with a Windows mobile phone. That didn't work out so well. Nothing against that. Well, okay. Anyway. Later on, I switched to an iPhone, and then when I came here, I switched to an Android phone. But honestly, the experience was still unsatisfying. And the most important problem was that my itineraries would be in my email, and I'd have to make sure, A, that it was synced to the right folder in my email, and B, that it synced and remained synced and didn't get tossed out by the time I needed it. So I would frequently find myself in line for, let's say, a rental car, frantically charging my phone off of my laptop battery pack just so I could bring up an email that told me where and when I was supposed to be at a certain place. At this point, though, I don't have to do any of that. With Tripit, I can just set it up to go through my email and find all of the travel-related stuff. Although it turns out that the security guys at Google don't like that, so I had to stop that. But fortunately, what you can do is set up an email forwarding rule. Just take everything that you get from, Expedia or Carlson Wagonlit or the other places that we use to book travel, and just forward it on to Tripit. And Tripit will actually figure out what the email means. It'll pull out all of the details about your hotel and about your flights, and then it will store that and send you reminders whenever you need them. So by the time I'm sitting in the taxi to go to the airport, I've got my entire trip right in front of me. Hotels, weather, cars, directions, even information about what friends of mine that use Tripit are going to be in the same place at the same time. But for me, the most exciting part about Tripit is just the way it seems to work like magic. Everything just appears. It comes up when it should. It lets me know what time I need to be where. It figures out where I am and where I need to be. And it works offline without having to connect up to an internet, which is really, really important as you're traveling because a lot of times internet access is either unavailable or incredibly expensive. It also does some clever things with intents, and Reto's going to be going over that a little bit later. But before we do that, it's time to take a quick look at...
We're going to take a look at Share Where Widget.
Nice handoff. That was beautiful.
I thought it was really clean. So I'm going to start to move over to this side because I know that we're going to be in frame. Now, I just want to take a moment to comment on the Google Play landing page for Share Where Location Widget. I really love their icon here. It's got that distinctive shape that provides really strong branding and even a hint as to what the app does without sort of resorting to that sort of square with rounded corners that you see so much.
They have a great icon and it doesn't have a background. Love it.
Exactly. It's also great to see that they've got a feature graphic, but here I think they could take another pass at this. The feature graphics are really used in a lot of different places, including on the phone, not always at this massive size and resolution that you can see here. So a graphic like this that includes a lot of text is going to be pretty legible when it gets shrunk down into those smaller sizes. So I'd suggest that you rely on the description field, which is just below it, to detail the functionality of the app and really make the feature graphic a little more stylized in the same way that you've got this great logo icon. Make it more like that so that you're sort of just giving an idea of the app rather than trying to explain everything within a small feature graphic.
You know what this feature graphic says to me?
What does it say? It
says they hired a great designer and he made a great icon, and then like the CEO put together the feature graphic.
We've got everything we need. We don't need to pay another guy a couple of grand to create the feature graphic. Well,
exactly. I've got Photoshop.
Exactly. So yeah, maybe make it look like a designer did the feature graphic as well. I think that's really going to help you out. It just gives you that much more professional feel. Now, if we actually look at the app itself, in terms of functionality, this is a much simpler, maybe you would even say sort of tighter focus than either of the other apps we're looking at today. So the idea here is a pretty simple one. It lets you create a home screen widget or a number of home screen widgets which will send preset messages to one or more recipients. And those messages can go out via SMS, email, or actually using any app that you like using intents. It's a simple concept and one which I actually considered writing a while back, an app I called One-Click SMS, which had a very similar idea. Sort of, I just wanted to always tell my wife I'm on my way home when I was on my way home without having to try and do all the swipey stuff, just press a button. And this is exactly what this app does. So I love the idea of having a one-touch emergency widget on my home screen to let me, let friends and family know that I've survived the inevitable San Francisco earthquake, or that and that I'm okay, or that I'm not okay, and having my location embedded within that message so that they know where in the rubble to dig through, I think would be really useful. As well as things like I've arrived safely, my flight's just landed, I'm on my way home, any of those sorts of things. So being able to do all of that really quickly without having to scroll through contacts lists or try and type in a keyboard while I'm walking, half asleep or jet lagged is really a plus. There's some UI work that could be done to improve the UX, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that later. But they've done some great work in terms of keeping the functionality simple and using intents to make the app even more powerful without having to do much extra work. So the best thing that they've done is keep it simple and an app that does one thing, and it does it very well.
Love it. So each of these apps offers some valuable features to help you when you're traveling. Taking a step back, let's take a look at the key features we're looking for in a pure Android travel assistance app.
Okay, so the feature set of each of these apps are kind of orthogonal. They're all really useful for travelers, but there's very little overlap.
Right, so that's handy because it helps focus on how they're achieving some of that magical feature set rather than debating the relative merits of each feature.
Exactly. So each of these apps needs to work when I'm away from home, right? Because they're travel apps, that's the whole point. And so that means that I'm likely to be charging my phone less often, so battery life and battery consumption becomes really important. Data transfer is likely to be slower. It's probably going to be roaming, so it's probably going to be expensive. So back home, I may not care. Suddenly, I'm in Italy. I'm paying a lot more for my roaming costs, so I care about data transfer. And frankly, I'm probably going to be turning it on and off depending on when I need stuff.
At the same time, a lot of times when you're traveling, you will get great data every now and then, like when you've got Wi-Fi, right?
Exactly.
So, in Italy, for instance, they have Wi-Fi on the trains. If you could hook up to
No,
that.
they have Wi-Fi on the trains.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, in Italy, it's all Wi-Fi.
Right. Shrimp on the bobby.
Exactly.
Anyway, the point is that you're not just having non-existence data or expensive data, you're having very intermittent data. So when you do have Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi or Waffle or whatever it is, you probably want to take the most advantage of that.
Exactly. And of course, location is key. It's particularly important because you want to know where you are, but this has to be balanced around the fact that you don't want to be draining the battery getting those location updates all the time. So it's really a balancing act of wanting to have fresh data, having constant data, working offline, accurate location without draining the battery when, chances are you're going to have your phone, you're going to be using it a lot, but you're only going to be charging it at the end of every day.
Right.
So the final result really does emphasize the efficiency of apps serving this market.
So last year's I.O., Reto spent a bunch of time talking about how to ensure your app is always fresh, which is extremely important for apps. Is that an Android using deodorant?
It is, to maintain freshness.
Silly person. Androids don't smell.
I'm just going to pop that in front so everyone can see the link to the presentation as well.
Indeed.
Yeah, so it was all about freshness. Not just about Androids using deodorant, but also, this is really important for apps like Foursquare and Tripit, where in these sorts of situations, latency is your enemy, particularly if you're late for a train or you're just tired after a long day of sightseeing and you just want to find somewhere to eat. What you don't want to do is spend a lot of time waiting for your phone to refresh, to find a connection, to download information. You just want to have everything at your fingertips so that you can glance at it and keep running, basically. So let's have a look at Foursquare in a little more detail. All right, so let me bring up the giant phone.
Giant fake phone!
Boom.
Woo!
Nice.
All right.
Perfect. So you can see that Foursquare has done a fantastic job on pretty much everything. They've created something that's really engaging, really interesting, really great to look at. They've got a modern looking UI. You can look at it straight away and you can see that it feels like a modern a modern Android phone. It's all using holo theming, all of that good stuff. And what's really useful here is that what Ian is experimenting with here is that the local search feature, which we were discussing beforehand, and that's kind of the key here. So you can see as we go through here, it's got the map, it's showing where your friends are. So if you're traveling in a group, which is something we used to do a lot of for things like Google Developer Days and Dev Fests, you can see where other people that you're traveling with are at. Where's everyone going out for a drink after the conference is finished? You can track them all down. You can find places that other people have rated, perhaps on previous trips. So it's really a way for you to be able to get some idea of confidence as to, where should I go? I just want to grab a meal. I'm in a place that I'm not familiar with. What's a good place? Is there anywhere we're recommending in the nearby neighborhood that you would agree or disagree with?
Oh, absolutely. Cafe Blaze.
Blaze is great.
Excellent cafe.
Yeah. So that's a good choice that they've selected there, actually. And you can go through and this sort of consistent clean UI is pervasive throughout the entire app. It shows you the information that you want, address, details, who's checked in, photos, all of that sort of information, and does it in a really clean, natural way. Again, what I really like about this is the simplicity. It keeps everything really simple. Shows you the information that you need without sort of making an overly complicated UI. So it really is something that's easy to use and quite addictive, I think. You don't have this mountain of information. I think that's a challenge for a lot of apps like this, is that there are a lot of venues around. So there's this tendency to just drop 1,000 pins on the screen at any given time, and that's not actually really useful. What you want to know is, where do I want to go? And this is somewhere where choice can be a problem. If I'm standing on Castro Street, I know there's a bunch of restaurants around. I want to know which one I should go to based on the things that I like, that my friends have checked into, and those sorts of things. And that's something which I think they do a really good job of.
Absolutely. And just as a side note, you can see the design here is really beautiful, and they've done some of the things that we've talked about. Putting your media front and center, making sure that you make good use of space. Every time something is blank, it's for a reason. But mostly just bringing up these beautiful pictures.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what this is all about. I mean, what Foursquare has, which a lot of other apps which are offering similar services don't, is a huge community of people which are contributing to the information here. So we have lots of pictures contributed by users which you can trust, because it's not the picture that the owner has taken on the day where he's cleared out everyone and given everything a spick and span clean. It's pictures which people have taken while they've been hanging out there. So they've done a really good job. So what I want to talk about a little bit is use this basically as an excuse to talk a little bit about how Foursquare have done the job that they have done. So it's kind of simple enough to get location updates for Android, but what Foursquare have done a really good job of is making sure that location updates are as low latency as possible. So there's a few tricks that you can use to maintain your location freshness without draining the battery completely. So you can significantly reduce the latency for getting your first location fix by retrieving the last known location from the location manager each time the app is resumed. So if you have a look at this code snippet, I'll just pop that in front as well so you can perhaps read that a little bit more easily. So in this snippet, we're going to iterate through each location provider on the device, including those that aren't currently available. And we're going to seek out the most timely and most accurate last known location. So if there's one or more locations available from within the allowed time frame, then we can return the one which has the most accurate result. And if there isn't, then we return the most recent result. Though if we're just doing that, the most recent result, but it's kind of beyond our latency window, it's pretty good practice to request a single location update from every available provider to try and get a more recent result. At this point, it doesn't even matter which is the more accurate result. You just want to get something that's a little more timely so that you get something which is in the vaguely correct location. And then obviously you can continue to do your location updates to try and get something even more useful.
So one thing that I've always wanted to ask you, Reto, about location, because I know you're kind of the location guy.
Sure.
So I remember when I first started traveling, and this is way back in the dark ages when we didn't have offline maps and we didn't have really good location providers, and I found an app called Maverick that was mostly for geocaching. And so they made it work in the wilderness.
Nice.
And it turned out that, for me anyway, coming from the US, London was the wilderness.
Effectively.
So what it did was it allowed me to download a bunch of map tiles, which may or may not have actually been legal.
It downloaded them regardless.
Indeed. And then it would find GPS, but it also kept track of my location through Dead Reckoning. And do any of the phones we have now do that automatically? Is that part of the location provider?
Not that I'm aware of, no. I think the location providers that we're using at the moment are fairly simplistic in that it's just GPS or a network location, what do we call it, NLP, network location provider. So using sort of cell ID and Wi-Fi rather than sort of momentum and Dead Reckoning and those sorts of things. Though I think that's something which the industry is heading towards.
Right.
So it'd be fantastic to see more and more of those sorts of features become part of the location providers available.
Wouldn't that be great? Now, what implications does that have for power, though?
Well, I guess that's kind of the question, and that's one of the important reasons why within Android you shouldn't be specifying a particular location provider. So at the moment, it's just assumed that GPS is going to drain your battery and the network location provider is going to be relatively low power. But these days, it's actually becoming a point where a lot of the GPS chips are becoming more and more power efficient and getting built into the hardware itself. So the actual location drain is significantly lower. By comparison, the network location providers are using a lot more features, things like gyroscopes, things like momentum, all of those things, which can comparatively increase its battery drain. So what it then means is that it's kind of up to the system to figure out how to balance those things and provide you as an accurate result as you can without draining the battery. And so, for us right now, that means using things like criteria to specify a location provider based on the power drain or the accuracy you need, rather than saying, hey, I think that this implies that, so I'm going to use that particular provider.
So as with many things Android, you really don't want to go too low level yourself, because you know that things are going to get better, and they're going to get better in a very unpredictable way, where on some devices they're much better in terms of power, for instance, and other devices they haven't made those changes. So you're always safest going with the basic system, and then if you absolutely have to tweak things for specific classes of devices, maybe you want to do that.
Exactly. And a good example is if you're creating a device which lets you understand how many GPS satellites you've got in view, and we looked at a couple of these apps a little while ago, sort of these GPS apps. Clearly they want the GPS provider. Whether it's accurate or draining the battery or whatever, they don't really care. That's not the point. For everything else, you want it to be as high level as possible, and then trust that as the framework team are able to make improvements to these APIs, that suddenly your app will get better and more efficient and more accurate without you actually having to do anything.
Right. Yeah, I think this is a good area. If you're doing a location app, stay tuned and make sure you follow not only Android but the different chipset vendors and see what kind of changes they're making, because I know there's a lot of active research in this area.
Absolutely. I think we've been hearing a lot about things like sort of passive background location updates, and you can see apps like Google Now, in fact, being able to give you sort of these really cool hints about how far you've walked, or suggesting things based on your location and those sorts of stuff. So that's kind of cool. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can do some of those things in just a minute.
Great, let's do that.
So generally, I prefer to use pending intents rather than location listeners when I'm making my location request, and that's because it offers the flexibility of registering receivers in multiple activities or services, or even directly in the manifest. And in fact, by doing that, you can make your app silently update your location, just like what we mentioned, and potentially even update the list of nearby venues. So an app like Foursquare can sort of passively listen for these location changes, and then in the background, every once in a while, actually pull down nearby locations. So when you open the app, you're not waiting for that sort of feeling like it's interminable. Come on, yeah, I was there half an hour ago, I'm here now, just give me something, more reasonable.
Well, and let's remember too that while you're doing this, it's very, very important to persist that information, because your pending intents and any listener of this type is going to be running in the background, which means that if the user, let's say, boots up a game or starts to run out of battery, you're going to be on the list to be killed.
Absolutely.
And if you're keeping that information in memory, then it's just going to go away, and essentially you've just wasted a bunch of power for nothing. So make absolutely sure that that gets persisted out to either a content provider or your own file system database or whatever.
Yeah, shared preferences can be a good one for that
there
as
you
well.
go.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. So now, requesting location updates, particularly if you're using something like GPS, anything which is sort of high power while your app isn't in the foreground, is kind of a bad idea. It's going to drain the battery, it's going to make people angry. So what you're going to do instead is use a passive location provider to piggyback your location updates when other apps are requesting them. So again, I'm going to pop the code in front. So you can see in this code snippet, we request location updates using a passive provider that's then going to broadcast a pending intent whenever it receives any of those changes. And it includes a receiver definition as well down the bottom, which is what you put in your manifest, which is then going to listen for those broadcast intents in order so that you can then do something with them. So within our receiver definition, we can choose what to do when those new locations come in, which may be store the location for later use, though often that's going to be duplicating the work that you can do just by querying the get last known location. Or you can do other things like prefetching nearby locations when certain conditions are met. So you may want to do that much less frequently than the updates that you are receiving.
Exactly. Now the door is just open and Billy's sticking his head in, so there's something wrong with the show. What's wrong, Billy? No?
I'll get it.
Oh.
Outstanding.
Beautiful.
He's just making sure we're actually doing work. We're not just sitting in here drinking.
Exactly.
I respect I respect his confidence in us.
Absolutely.
So let's move on. So that's an entirely blank screen. Very disconcerting.
Yeah. Mike Winton, don't ever stick your head in again. You screwed up everything.
So this technique of prefetching can be really powerful, but it's also inherently risky as you're introducing battery and bandwidth cost by downloading data that may never actually be necessary. So if you're looking at a travel assistance app, that can be kind of touch and go, and that's something which I think Foursquare are really aware of. And this is an app where, again, that balance between being an app that you use a lot at home and an app that's really useful when you're away becomes kind of an interesting balance of how do you maintain that freshness without draining the battery and becoming something which people don't want to have running when they're overseas.
Well, and I think this actually starts to get into the secret sauce of what makes an app truly amazing and what it means. For instance, we've talked about this with video apps where everybody and their brother uses some form of media player on any platform. But, Flash player on the web, for instance. But where the secret sauce comes in is how do you make something start really fast and play at a good bandwidth and switch bandwidth easily. And in location apps, it's really how do you know when a person's going to try and use it. And if you look at what we've done with Google now, it really tries to predict, based on your past behavior, what you're going to need at a particular point. And I think that when you look at Foursquare, you're seeing some of those smarts, some of those intelligence. I think you could probably even go further and make it into something where you kind of know when the app's going to be needed because you can see where the user is and even how fast they're going and what time of day it is and predict what kind of information they're going to need.
Absolutely. So another useful best practice is monitoring the state of your providers. Right? So this is kind of important. So when you make a location update request, even when you're using criteria, the location manager is just going to choose one of those providers whose updates it's going to monitor. So whatever provider happens to be active, whether the user has GPS ticked or the network location provider ticked. It's going to try and make a determination based on what's available, but that can change in real time. So again, I'm going to stick this code, I'm going to stick this in front, because then I can move around a little bit more. Gosh. Alright, so this snippet is monitoring two conditions. It's checking to find out the location provider that we're using to see if it's being deactivated. So a user can turn these on and off. So it's checking to make sure that, okay, we've decided to use GPS and the user goes and turns off GPS. We're going to be able to then find another provider. And likewise, we're going to check to see if there is another provider that becomes available. So maybe we would have used GPS, but it was disabled and then it gets turned on. We want to switch without the user having to exit the app and come back in or manually do something that way. It should all happen dynamically. So in either case, we're just going to rerun the process used to determine which provider that is currently available is best for our current needs. And this technique ensures that we can continue to receive location updates without interruption, even if the user is toggling GPS and network location provider details. So that's interesting. I was sure that there was a picture behind this. Nonetheless, you can find all of these tips in great detail in the deep dive into location blog post. That is actually on the next page. Boom.
I am so sorry. I fixed almost all of those typography errors, and this one I guess I didn't see.
That's okay, but nonetheless, so this is a blog post I wrote mid last year, I think, and even created a sample project that includes the basic Foursquare functionality. Let's see, I have to do 2 jumps. There we go. For finding nearby venues. So this is displaying them in a list, allows you to check in using Google Places API, which you can find here. So that's basically, it's all of the sorts of things that we were talking about, all of those best practices around using passive location provider, monitoring location provider changes, and being able to make sure that you're doing everything in the background in an intelligent way that hopefully isn't going to drain your battery.
Now, Tripit, the need for freshness is a little more different. So the important thing about Tripit is, and let's bring up the giant fake phone, shall we?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So with Tripit, you're going to have, and now you don't have any actual plans in here, but I noticed that some of your friends do.
Well, I was going to go back to a trip that I did. I think it's probably going to be the easiest.
Okay.
In fact, let me navigate through that. We go to past trips.
The idea with Tripit is that it's all of your travel information in one place, and it's going to show you the most relevant thing first and try and remove all the irrelevant nonsense. So it needs to know what time it is, and it needs to know where you are. So in this particular case, for instance, knowing that we're going from Melbourne to Perth is only important if we are not in Perth. And you could find that in 2 different ways, right? And so you could find that out either through location or by time, but probably location's a little safer because the flight may have been delayed.
Or I may have missed the flight.
Indeed. Same thing with the hotel, same thing with everything. The idea is once you've got there, you don't need to see it anymore. So it doesn't need to be updated perhaps as frequently as Foursquare does, but it does need to update at least in time to be able to show and hide this information. Right?
Exactly, and one of the other things which I think is really important is that it needs to be able to update. There's sort of this balance, because if something does change, if my flight time changes or my hotel booking changes, I need to see that updated straight away, and that needs to be as low latency as possible. But the frequency of that, it's pretty rare. It's not, once the travel is booked, you're going to be lucky if there's a change once a day, if that.
Indeed, you certainly don't want to be checking every 5 minutes to see if your flight's delayed. Instead, what you really want is to know exactly when your flight's delayed and then never worry about it again, right? So if I was doing this with just my airline's going to send me an SMS to let me know that the flight's delayed. Now, I don't want Tripit to send me an SMS because there's a better way to do that, right?
Absolutely. You want, yeah, exactly.
In fact, I think what we want is to, hopefully what it does is use GCM.
Exactly. So let's have a look at some of the things which it should be able to do and do really well. So knowing where we are is important, but it's much more important that I get my itinerary changes as quickly as possible. And as I mentioned, let me see if I can drop this behind us. That's neater. Oh, that looks a bit weird. Nonetheless, but this does set up a conflict. And like we said, it's that idea of we want things to happen straight away, but we don't want to have to do these manual updates. And so what that does is that we
I love these graphs that you make because they're complete nonsense, but they do get the idea across.
It goes up and to the right, up and to the right. So it's a good graph,
Nice.
right? Do the obvious graphs, people. So it's this: how do we reduce the latency, but not have that increase in battery life? And that's generally what happens. Is that the fresher the data is, the more battery cost. And where you actually want to be is somewhere down here, where you have zero latency and maximum battery life. Interesting. I think that was my microphone. You have to dance. While I fix this. Nice.
Dance, monkey, dance! The reason I'm dancing instead of sharing technical information is because I was sick yesterday. Reto had to script this whole show himself, and he's only been a little bit bitter about it. Reto?
Only a little. So even if you're not downloading anything every time you do the poll, you're still potentially draining the battery. And that's because of the way that the battery life cycle model works, or I should say the cell network life cycle of the cell radio, which is going to stay on high power for around 10 seconds and around low power for kind of up to a minute every time you ping a server. Even if the server's going, it's cool, nothing you need to do, it's still going to drain the battery. So if you're doing these updates every minute, then you're just leaving the cell radio on permanently, which is going to destroy your battery life. And so this is compounded by the typical update rates of apps like Tripit, where if my itinerary changes, I want that update like now, like as soon as it happens. But it's not going to happen that often. So how can we optimize those updates and minimize the latency? Well, in fact, and the most important answer is to use Google Cloud Messaging. Like, seriously, use Google Cloud Messaging. It is going to solve most of these problems. It's something which Tripit, as far as I can tell, has done, because there is that option to choose manual/push, and I had a look in their manifest, and they are using those things, but they still have the options for those more frequent updates. So I kind of want to hear from the guys at Tripit and find out, are you using it exclusively? If not, why not? And is there a reason for still having that option to do the manual polling, which is just going to drain the battery?
Well, there was a time when Google Cloud Messaging was C2DM, and there was a cap. Right? You could only send so many messages a day. Now that's not in place anymore. So it may be that in the past it was difficult for them to guarantee that they wouldn't hit their C2DM limit.
That could well be the case.
Now, of course, Google Cloud Messaging isn't doing anything magical. It's just taking advantage of the fact that a lot of apps want to do this sort of thing, and so it makes a lot more sense to coalesce that into one ping that's done intelligently with battery life in mind, rather than having everyone ping their servers at whatever time they feel like.
Exactly. So it's a way that you can send a message to a particular device or set of devices used by a particular user, informing the app running on that device that there's updates which they need to retrieve. So the result is near instant updates with none of the battery drain, or at least your app doesn't get blamed for any of the battery drain caused by, which we would normally get with regular polling. So you get to blame it all on Google, which is much cooler, right? If anyone's going to get blamed for battery drain, it may as well be the system rather than your app, if you can. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Similarly, you'll want to prefetch as much data as possible, and this is particularly important for an app like Tripit, and it's something that they do really well, in that I had to think about whether or not they did, which made me realize that they must, because otherwise I would have thrown it through a window. So, offline access here is absolutely vital. For a lot of the travel, particularly when we were sort of jumping from country to country, you don't have the opportunity to buy a local SIM just for the data, which you often do if you're going to be there for a week or so. If you're going to spend 12 hours, you're just going to have your corp global roaming SIM, and you're going to disable data a lot. Airports, it often takes a long time once you get out of flight mode for the data connection to start back up, and I want to know where to tell the taxi driver to go without having to wait for half an hour for my phone to turn on or to find Wi-Fi in order to be able to get those updates. So for apps like Foursquare, though, prefetching can be tricky. So because there's no knowing which places a user is going to want to check into, or what areas or categories they're going to want to explore. And you can't prefetch everything, because that would just be a huge battery drain and a huge bandwidth drain, particularly if you're roaming. So prefetching can be kind of a cat and mouse game between trying to get the right details without wasting too much bandwidth. So for apps like Tripit, where the information users want is relatively small, well encapsulated around a trip, and entirely predictable. You even know when they're going traveling, so you can wait to do the prefetching until the day before, pull it all down, stick it on the device, and then it's just there and it's just working. And so you can go into offline airplane mode and it all still works. So in that instance, I think prefetching can be really, really powerful. And along the same lines, it's really important that you limit bandwidth as much as possible, and that means caching results, particularly images, or anything that's likely to remain static. Better still, your server should specify the lifetime and update timestamps of its responses, and that's what you can see in this piece of code, which I'm just going to step back from rather than go full screen. So in this code snippet, we're just checking the server response headers to see if we actually need to bother downloading the rest of the response body. So this is still going to cost you in terms of hitting the server to see whether there's anything to get, but at least you're not then downloading extra data that you already have or that hasn't changed since the last time you pinged the server.
If it's possible to look ahead too and determine how fresh each piece of data is, that's really useful, because in a lot of apps, I would much rather know that a piece of data is stale than to not see it at all and see a loading bar or the progress bar instead.
Absolutely. So it's probably also worth mentioning that network state and the type of network that you're connected to can also be really important in determining the frequency of your data transfers and the aggressiveness of your prefetching. So you can actually monitor all of that. As you can see in this code snippet, where we're checking the server response headers. That doesn't seem true. So in this snippet, what we're doing is modifying the size of the prefetching cache depending on the network speeds. We're going to increase it when we're on Wi-Fi or on 4G, or we're going to drop it down when we're on slower networks. And so again, all we're doing here is trying to find a better balance between battery drain and latency reduction. So I'm going to go, or I do go into much more detail on this, on how to create apps which are more efficient in my I/O talk from earlier this year, which is the link here. It's bit.ly/protips2, and there are more details on creating efficient download patterns in this Android training class as well.
I love that pro tips picture, by the way. Did J.J. Abrams make that for you?
He did, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I know a guy. So finally, let's take a closer look at shareware, which is our third app.
That's share-aware, of course, not just shareware. Could be shareware.
I think it's just shareware.
Oh, it is shareware.
It's where with like where. Homonyms for the win.
It's shareware.
Yeah,
not shareware.
Not shareware. Yeah.
Right.
No, don't share this app. That would be piracy, and that would be bad.
Wonderful.
Now, unlike Foursquare and Tripit, shareware, which is what I've written there, was self-nominated and isn't yet an editor's choice on Google Play. And so we're going to try and be a little bit more...
we can go nuts on this.
Yeah, so we're going to try and be a little more constructive. Let's say constructive.
There you go.
Exactly. Because, you put your app up here, I'm going to assume that you want to have our feedback, or you wouldn't have asked for it. But our goal is still to set it up, to bring it up to a standard where we can show it off to everyone else in our pure Android collection. So that's pretty much the goal for any app that we look at here. We want to bring it up to something which we can show off to everyone else.
Well, and like you said in your morbid preamble, this is an app that has great functionality.
Absolutely.
Something that we really want to own, but maybe not in this exact form.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to give the developer a chance to share their experiences in implementing some of our suggestions, and even explaining some of the choices that they've made in later episodes of Developer Strike Back. So stay tuned for that. But let's have a look at the app.
Let's do.
So the thinking behind this app is pretty straightforward. Let's just bring the giant phone up. So the idea here is that you're going to create a bunch of home screen widgets which all have predefined messages which you can set to a predefined audience. So, and in case of emergency, or I've just come home, I've just landed, any of those things. So you can do it all ahead of time. Now, what happens when you load the app up the first time is you get this massive screen of options. Now, it is a widget app, and there is a challenge associated with widgets apps in that you can't just have the main launcher icon launch the app widget selector. So you have to find a way to add meaningful value in that when you first open up the app. And that's a challenge that we see a lot of widgets apps do. And so a lot of them will do this, go straight into the configuration screen, which isn't a bad idea, except as you could see, it's kind of a complicated options menu. There's a huge number of options. There's some information in there as well as some actual settings. There's help, about, contact us, little text fields which just explain what the app does. And it becomes a little bit overwhelming for a first-time user.
It feels like this needs more than anything is a tutorial.
Sure.
It really does need a little animated tutorial with little back and next buttons.
Absolutely.
And a skip button.
Yes.
Little pictures of fingers and things like that.
Yeah.
Needs to, because you need to help people understand. This is an incredibly useful piece of functionality that a lot of people are going to want, especially people who are not particularly computer literate. So they may or may not know where to find widgets in Android, but they certainly know they certainly know what they want the app to do.
Absolutely.
And they just need to be told how to do it.
That's right. And so what you can see on the home screen here is the end result of placing these widgets. So you can see that we've got different sized widgets. So this is a 1x1, and we've got a 2x1 here as well. And if we click
on those aren't resizable widgets?
They do have a resizable one as well.
Okay.
So there's a third option, which I actually thought I dropped on here, but maybe I hadn't, which lets you do a resizable one. In fact, we can bring it up on widgets here.
Well, I just smelled another business opportunity. I could do home screen launcher widgets like this and go full Metro.
Absolutely. So you can see here actually, so this is the 4x1, which is actually resizable. And you can see, again, this is the configuration screen for each of the widgets. Now, straight away, the UI is it could use a little work. Let's say it looks kind of gingerbready. It's got the black theme, which I think in this instance doesn't really work because it just feels like it's blending into the background because it isn't full screen either. And I can kind of see why they haven't gone full screen because they want it to look like it's a configuration dialog. But I think in this instance you could actually benefit from actually launching a full activity, which just you go into, you set things up, you hit save or OK or whatever, and your configuration is complete.
Yeah, and even if you are going to do a full screen or not full screen dialogue, it should be prettier than this.
Absolutely.
And, part of this is on us, right? I mean, orange on black was cool for like 5 months back in 2010,
so it's claimed.
It's over.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We all like blue now.
Right.
And you can see, I mean...
We liked blue before, actually, too.
That's true.
Nobody likes orange.
No one likes orange. And you can see straight away why this kind of creates issues. Like, straight away, it looks kind of weird. And then if I click this, so they've done the right thing here in that it does launch the contact picker to let you choose which contact you want to include. But this is all holo themed.
I love how Reto has 2 friends.
Well, this is Daniel's phone. And one of Daniel's friends is Daniel. Awkward. So you can't get this cognitive dissonance of like, well, I'm definitely not in the same app anymore. Right? So I don't know what's going on here. But if you click through, then and again, you're bringing up this kind of weird, non-holo, non-modern UI.
Yeah, it's a really strange mix of styles.
Exactly. And so you really want to try and find a way to use sort of the default themes so that you're keeping up with whatever style is prevalent at the time on whichever device is installed.
It also feels like this could use more graphics. It could
absolutely.
use something that's sort of explanatory. Like I would even imagine maybe a little view pager or something that chooses different types of widgets with graphics that represent each of them.
Just thing that you're going to want to do. Maybe even have a bunch of presets. Could be interesting. There are certain use cases which you've probably got in mind, and whether or not anyone will ever actually use them, it gives you that, because this is the first screen that you're going to see basically when you open this app. If you know how widgets work, you're not going to click the launcher icon. You're just going to go add widget, drop your 2x1 on there, and this is the screen you're going to get. So this really needs to welcome users, tell them what the app does, how they're supposed to use it, which checkbox they're supposed to have checked by default, and make it as simple as possible.
I have to re-emphasize what you just said. Widgets should have presets, and this one in particular. I mean, I think you could cover 99% of all possible cases for this widget by just providing 5 or 10 presets.
Absolutely. And from here, basically everything works as you would kind of expect. If you hit any of these buttons, it brings up a confirmation dialog, which you can skip. So you can say, you know what, if I want to send an emergency message, I don't want to have to do 2 clicks, I just want to do 1.
Well, and once again, this is sort of it's a confusing dialogue. Like I've just gone out of something that's beautiful, which is the Android home screen with the very nice widget, and now I'm looking at this thing that, it almost looks like some pirated app just took over my screen.
Exactly, and so you want this to be small as well. We've got a whole bunch of sort of empty space here. So if you're not going full screen, go as small as you can and make this, it is just a confirmation dialog. I've already selected all of this stuff. So you almost want to be able to have just a big send button and then maybe an ability to edit as well if you want to.
Right, you want the send button to be big, you want the information to be there but not editable, then you want to have a way to go edit it. Because by bringing up the edit boxes as it is now, A, you're introducing possible error where somebody accidentally hits a key that they didn't intend to, and B, you're making it seem like I have to edit it. Like that's my job now is to edit this. But no, I'm just trying to tell Lassie where to dig to get me out from underneath the rubble.
Precisely.
I don't need all this.
Exactly. And so there's, again, sort of, what I really like here is there's this ability to set a timer. So you can say, set it 5 minutes into the future.
It'd be great if they used the new control for that though.
It kind of would. And it's
horrible.
It is. And it's a really useful function. So I would actually kind of want to have that as the main thing. So the two main things here is I want send it now, send it in a few minutes, and edit also maybe. So you almost want to flip the importance of those things so that the editing functionality is up on the top right and the being able to set a timer is right there. I also note that, so there's no way to cancel here as well, which is interesting. So I've done, but I changed my mind. I just want to send it now. I kind of can't, which is, again, it's just sort of that user flow. You want to make everything as simple and easy as possible and make it impossible for a user to do it wrong. It's never the right answer to say, oh, you're using the app wrong. That should never even be an option. Right? So they should only ever be able to use it right. One thing that they have done nicely here is that one of the recipients you can set is share with other app, which is what we've got ticked now. So if we do that, we can see it's set up an ongoing notification, which is timer set to an hour. Interesting. I'm going to cancel that one and set off another one really quickly. Now what it's going to do is find my current location. So now all that information we gave earlier on about being able to find a location really quickly becomes really important, because I don't want to sit here waiting for it to find my GPS signal. Anything is good enough right now. So you can by all means check to see whether you can get something really accurate. If it doesn't happen within 5 seconds, screw it. Go with what you had last and send that. Maybe send a second message. Maybe make that an option. So that's going to keep doing its thing, retrieving current location for a while. Interestingly, their app comes up when that happens as well. So I think you've probably done something weird with your intent receivers there. So this shouldn't be getting triggered from clicking on the widget. That's not a great user experience. So you want to make sure that doesn't end up on the activity stack associated with your activity when you're entering it from the widget. So once that's happened, it will actually then let you send that message via any of the other apps that you've got on the system, which is a nice, a nice way of doing things. And in fact, I guess maybe take that as an opportunity to talk a little bit about exactly what they're doing there. Oh, there it is. So that's it's now got the location, and we can share it using any of the apps which are capable of sharing text, which is nice. So perhaps, as we were saying, right, perhaps even more so than Foursquare, low latency location detection is absolutely critical for this app. So I'd be interested to know from the developers what techniques they're using to get that quick and accurate location fix, particularly because it's not that quick. So I'd like to see them doing some work to improve that. But one of the things they have done well is this sharing using any app dialog, which I really like, and which is something which Tripit has done pretty well as well, making use of intents to add more functionality to their apps without having to do any extra work.
So we're running out of time, but let's quickly go over what you need to do to add this sort of share intent to your app.
Absolutely. So let's see. Boom. So the details for what I'm describing here are all in this Android training class on sharing content, but the basics are actually pretty straightforward. You can create...
all that typography looked right on my laptop.
That's what they all say.
Yes, I know.
It was fine on my machine. So you create a new intent, you set the action to send, and then populate the text extra with the text that you want to transmit. Then you just start an activity using that intent. Now, in this example here, I'm actually forcing the activity chooser to be displayed every time. That's because users will often choose a default app for handling a lot of content, and for an app like this, you actually want to give the user a chance to say, well, which specific thing do you want? Because you've actually checked a box to say, send using another app. It kind of makes sense to give them an opportunity to say which app that they want. So, given that we are just about out of time, I think happily we're just onto the prescriptions for each of the apps that we want to look at. So let me pop all of this behind us, and we'll bring each of these up. So I think this is the prescriptions for Foursquare.
Indeed.
We didn't have a lot because they've done a pretty good job.
No, they really have. Yeah.
We're pretty impressed. I mean, the Foursquare team have spent a lot of time really refining and honing their app to try and make it as good as possible. They're really passionate about creating a pure Android experience, something that is really user-friendly, that makes the phone work better, that is, in all ways a positive and not a negative. So hats off to them.
Indeed. But as with any app that was designed almost exclusively in the Bay Area, it simply assumes too much about your network connection. It needs to be better offline and also better during changing network conditions.
Yeah, and so for me, I guess the key thing, and I have brought this up with the Foursquare team, and I know that they have good reasons for not doing this, but I'm going to mention it anyway for anyone else who's doing an app which does something similar, is support for being able to check in when I'm offline. So in the Bay Area, going inside ends up having better network access because everyone has free Wi-Fi.
Right.
Not the case in London, and a lot of the good venues are all like 3 stories underground so that, they don't get bombed in the Second World War, but also means that they have really bad network coverage and no free Wi-Fi because nothing is free in London. So being able to check in and then just have all of that get cached in a queue that then will check me into all of these places once I do get network access would be a really nice feature. So I'm going to take this opportunity to ask the Foursquare guys to do that
Would love
again. Tripit. Tripit, we had a couple more suggestions for them. Again, this is an app that we really love, and this is one of those apps which does everything right in terms of the service that it provides. Yes. Absolutely love it, totally indispensable. Would use it even if it was a terminal prompt. So that means that a lot of what we're actually saying here is, in a way, it's nitpicky, but it's also something which can make the app that much more appealing, that much more fun to use. And I think the key thing here is it would be great to see them take another pass at the design, another pass at the UI, now that we've had these changes to Holo. So kind of a UI overhaul would be kind of nice to see. So that's, we've got all the details there, but things like, getting rid of the menu button, not having the click to load more lists, just having that automatically fill as we scroll, more use of CTDM, better copying and pasting, and overall cleaner navigation.
Right.
And our third contender, so the shareware location widget, again, I think the key here is really a simplified workflow.
Right.
Everything should be easier, particularly the first time. It should just be click, click, that's my wife's contact, done.
We've talked about this many times, that a lot of apps are just difficult to get into, and what you need to do is just figure out what the most common use case is and just fill that stuff in for the user.
Exactly. And it seems kind of counterintuitive in a lot of ways to say, we want you to remove some of the options from your app. But it kind of works, particularly for something like this, which is really focused, is figure out what is it that people are downloading this app to do, and you can use analytics for that to find out what are the most common settings that they're choosing, what are the most common options that they're clicking, and make that not only the default, but maybe the only thing that you can do, and then worry about expanding those features in a way that's consistent with the app usage and easier to use as time goes on.
And definitely ditch the gingerbread. We're sorry. We're sorry we ever put it out.
Yeah.
Go to Holo.
It happens. But make a UI that's consistent with the rest of the framework, preferably something that's Holo, but definitely something which doesn't feel like it's being yanked out of an earlier phone and stuck in the middle of your app. And that's, again, particularly important for anything which is widget-based, because users aren't going to be in your app much, but when they are, you don't want to make it feel jarring. So that's kind of an important step. And also the widget is what you're doing, so make sure the widgets are really beautiful. They look kind of jaggy and blurred on the Galaxy Nexus, so make sure you've got the right assets, nice scalable assets, so that everything looks really beautiful. Because if it's going to live on the home screen, it needs to look nice. People want their home screens to look nice. So I think that just about takes us to the end of today's app clinic. Both Foursquare and Tripit of the apps that we looked at are already featured in Google Play's Editor's Choice category, which makes them a good chance to join the pure Android collection, particularly Foursquare, which, having looked at again today, it just continues to impress. So wherever possible in the future, we're going to prioritize reviewing apps by people who self-nominated them. So to be sure, so please be sure to head over to Trello to nominate your apps. And in fact, I'll stick that in the background as well. So I don't know if you can read that. I don't think that I can.
You want to bring that to the foreground.
Yeah, why not? Let's bring it to the front. Boom.
Yes.
So that's bit.ly/appclinic Trello. So that's where you're going to go to nominate the categories that you'd like us to review and to nominate your apps in particular for us to take a look at. So next week, what are we looking at next week?
Oh, if I knew, I'd be a genius. What are we looking at next week, Dan?
I'm going to read off the screen and say...
You guys are doing instant message.
Oh, it's on the screen.
It's on the screen. I wouldn't have asked you if I hadn't given you the answer.
Oh, dear.
So we're going to be choosing that later this afternoon. So if you have an instant messaging app that you would like us to check out, please make sure that you've got it nominated there so that we can, bring it up and talk about it next week.
Indeed. So instant message, should we narrow that down at all?
If you like.
Yeah. So these are apps like Google Talk or like, I don't know, is AOL Instant Messenger still a thing? Or like Skype.
Yeah. ICQ.
ICQ, yeah.
You're going to go old school?
Sure. So something that's going to allow you to type and or voice to each other.
Exactly.
I'm particularly interested in looking at what they call the push-to-talk apps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it'll be an interesting one to try and demo the apps as well. So we may need to get someone in another room to help us out. We'll see how it goes.
Indeed. Oh, that'll be interesting.
So that's it for today's episode of the App Clinic, but be sure to tune in next Tuesday for Android Design in Action with Roman, Nick, and Adam live for our New York studios. Now, before we sign off, I do want to ask producer Dan if we have any questions which we should answer in the negative 13 seconds that we have.
I didn't see anything that is worth your time. We just have the normal quality YouTube comments going on, so
okay.
Awesome.
Maybe better luck next week.
Keep it up, cool. Haters.
So we would love to answer any questions that you guys have during the show about the apps or about any of the technical content, or indeed just the structure of the show, given that we're trying things a little bit differently. So do be sure to send your comments through on Google Plus in particular.
Yes. Now, if you happen to be looking at this later on, remember we've got comments open on Google Plus that you can take a look at. And all you need to do is mention one of our names, and we'll see it and look at it.
Absolutely. So we'll be back again next week at the same time, and in the meantime we're going to be taking a look at some of our past App Clinic patients to see if any of them have attained the status of pure Android. So if you have had your app reviewed and you've made some changes and you'd love for us to take a look at those improvements, do let us know. My name is Reto Meier.
I'm Ian Nee Lewis.
And thank you for watching.
Cheers.